Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Tim McGinnis. I'm a director with the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. We are a government-registered crime victims assistance and crime prevention nonprofit organization based in Miami, Florida, USA, also Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, with affiliates in more than 60 countries around the world. We are a crime, specifically a scam victim support and assistance organization supporting scam victims worldwide. Welcome to our SCARS Weekend webinar. Joining me today is Debbie Montgomery Johnson, who is also a director of SCARS, and we'll go into a little bit more of her background in just a few moments. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, Dr. Tim. How are you today?
We're all good.
Good.
So what we're going to be talking about today is on the topic of how to tell your story. Now, this is going to be a two-part. So we're going to deal with part one today, and part one today is going to talk about specifically how to tell your story to the police. And we're going to walk through that entire process, since so many victims have such a terrible experience interacting with the police and being able to tell their story and report their crime effectively. We're going to walk through that process quite thoroughly and help you both prepare for it, and maybe if you've already talked to the police and had a bad experience, perhaps help you understand why that might have been. As I mentioned, my name is Dr. Tim McGinnis, and joining me is Debbie Montgomery Johnson, who is a SCARS director, entrepreneur, extraordinary motivator, author, publisher, military veteran, and victims supporter. So let's jump into our topic, if I can control the slideshow. How to tell your story, part one, the police. Now, the material from this particular presentation is an excerpt from our upcoming SCARS Gold book on telling your story. The SCARS Gold book, like all of the SCARS publishing books, are available on our SCARS publishing store at shop.againstscams.org. So let's start by talking, Debbie, when your scam happened, what was your experience like reporting it to the police?
Well, it's interesting. I actually didn't go to the local police right off the bat because—
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Well, back then, I mean, I had experience with the military and Department of Defense. And so my first go-to was IC3 and the FBI.
Right.
And it was as positive as it could be. It was actually the day after the scam was revealed that I fortunately had my documentation in order. And I mean, I had 4,000 pages of journal. I had printed in 5 volumes. I had a 3-ring binder, probably 3 inches, 4 inches thick, with every document that I had in sheets, document sheets. So I was very prepared with documentation. Don't ask me why I did that over those 2 years, but that was actually a blessing. And I walked in with my parents. We can go into that, but it was—
Well, we're actually going to go into that because that's part of our presentation.
Yeah, it was very daunting initially. I mean, even trying to find out where the FBI was. I'm in West Palm Beach, near West Palm Beach, Florida, and I actually just looked them up online, or looked them up, didn't have Yellow Pages back then. And I called, and I'm not sure I got the right place the first time, but I was quite persistent because I thought that because I knew that the scammer was overseas and I've watched a lot of shows where the FBI can catch those people. I figured they would be the first ones to go to. And when I got there, it was under construction and there was no one really to say, hey, go here, go here. But I was able to sit down with a detective, or I guess a special agent would be what you would call them, with all my documentation, and I presented it. Now I was very calm. I think when the scam for me was revealed and I actually saw him face to face online, that was the emotional hit the wall for me. And I was able to disassociate the heart from the head. And my head was speaking very clearly at that point. And I was very calm with them when I gave them the information. Now, when they turned around and were very empathetic, at least the agent I was with, and then he said, well, first off, Deb, we're sorry this has happened, and more men than women have been scammed in Palm Beach County for over $1 million, and they'll never tell. And besides that, you're a victim to this, you were manipulated. And I heard victim, I heard manipulation, I heard scam, and I was like, nope, that's not me. And I said,
we're going to go into that in quite a bit of depth as we go through this presentation, but let me just at the onset say one thing. SCARS no longer recommends that the FBI is your first point of reporting. So we're going to go into that in a little bit of detail, but as we have said previously in the previous webinar on justice, your first point of contact, well, everyone's first point of contact should be their local police, with the exceptions that we stated in previous. Don't report it at all.
Tim, we're losing you.
Can you hear me?
I can now. I didn't hear that last part.
Okay, sorry about that. What I said was we don't recommend that you report to the FBI immediately, and possibly not at all. And the reason is that we recommend that all of these crimes are reported to the Federal Trade Commission, who not only will collect the report, but will also forward it to the FBI. Now, the problem with the FBI, which covered you, Debbie, is generally speaking, federal investigations require a minimum threshold of $100,000 in losses before they'll really pay attention. A lot of scam victims lose more than that, so that's fine. And we're going to go through that in a minute, but definitely each individual scam victim should be their own best advocate. And that report to your local police, report to the Federal Trade Commission, and then if you want, do as you did, Debbie, and report it to the FBI. Go and visit a local FBI office if you can. It's very important that you, when you report these crimes, that you do it face to face. And we're going to get into that now. So.
Well, I want people to remember too, my scam ended in 2012, and a lot has happened in those 10 years.
Absolutely. The police were generally unprepared, ignorant, and not particularly kind to scam victims who they believed to be participants in their own misery.
True.
So we're going to begin with how to tell your story to your local police. In the very beginning, you must report this crime. Reporting these crimes is an absolute requirement for every victim. And it's a requirement for several reasons. Telling the local police becomes your first real experience with telling your story. This is very important to each individual victim. Keeping this a secret is a cancer that will eat you up over time. You're going to be facing another real person and will have to find the courage, the clarity, and the emotional control to be able to share the details of this crime without breaking down too much. This is not going to be easy. And we're going to explain both why that is and how to overcome the difficulty of telling your story to the local police.
May I add here that for me, I think the most important part was having my mother and dad there.
Absolutely.
I would say have a trusted friend. Someone needs to go with you as a buddy, just to give you the courage to keep walking in.
Okay. So the first thing that you have to decide as the victim of a crime And we're using the word victim because it's the least common denominator. Most of you listening to this are what we would characterize as survivors, some perhaps even thrivers. So please don't react to the use of that term. The first thing that's really important is deciding what is important. It begins with your initial preparation of the facts. Emphasis on the word facts. One of the problems that most scam victims have or face is that they do not really know what is real when initially speaking with the police or government agencies. They also do not know what is important to the police. You've just come out of this fake relationship. You've been told weeks, months, sometimes years worth of lies. You've been heavily manipulated. And after the scam, you're shocked and confused, maybe even afraid. You may have been threatened. So you don't know how to begin or what to do or say. Before you talk to the police, start collecting the evidence. Get organized. Because that is what it is. It is evidence of a crime. And online crimes are real crimes. Now, one of the things that's really important, and you certainly did this, Debbie, is victims use the words scam and scammers, and these are euphemisms. The crime is fraud. The scammer is a criminal. Begin by using these terms immediately. The way you think about it, the crime reflects how others will think about it also. Scammer does not sound as serious as a transnational organized criminal. Scam is not as serious as fraud. Every police department understands that. So begin by organizing your information. You're going to need a digital folder. So create a digital folder on your computer if you have one. If this all happened on your phone, then you'll have to preserve the information in another way. Notice that we said preserve the information. Lots of people are telling you erroneously, delete the information immediately. No. It's evidence of a crime. If you lost money, you need to preserve this information at least initially. And the reason is that scammers do get arrested. Scammers get arrested in the United States, they get arrested in Canada, they get arrested in Africa. Now, if they get arrested in a different country, your evidence probably has no value. But if there were accessories that were arrested in the same country where you live, then your evidence may actually be very important. It could be the difference between a conviction or not. Save all files and photos into a laptop folder to preserve it for the police if they need it, but also so that it is hidden away and out of your sight so that you're not constantly reminded of it, so that you're not constantly reminded of the pain. Put everything you can find in there, be as complete as possible. And after the reporting process is done, don't go back and look at it again. Put it in a zip file so you can't even look at it easily.
You might even put it on a separate little drive just
Exactly.
to get it away, because it is a little bit triggering. Even for me, it's been 10 years when I am asked to pull those things out, to mostly for media relations. It is a little bit triggering to read the words and to see the pictures again. So yeah, have them, but put them away.
Indeed. But don't delete it. Don't let amateurs drive you into doing something that can actually be detrimental to the justice process. On your phone. So we talked about what if it's on your phone. If all you used was your phone, you still need to preserve the important parts. And there are tricks that help you preserve the information in an out-of-the-way place for later use. A lot of phones, for example, are connected to cloud storage for your gallery. If you're on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, just leave the messages there. They'll be preserved permanently as long as you need access to them. but you also have to have the discipline not to constantly be going back and rereading things. So if you don't have cloud storage, one of the tricks that you can do is to send yourself messages, either texts or on Facebook Messenger, etc. You can do a screen grab and send those to yourself so that you got them preserved in another way. Include what you need to keep. Another trick is that you can email text messages, chats, etc. You can copy and paste it into an email and send that to yourself to preserve it. Paper folder. We also recommend that you print out what is possible and save it in a paper file folder. This is usually easier to present to the police. Especially try to print out the receipts for bank and money transfer transactions. These are critically important, since these have the most importance to the police because they may in fact be working with those to try whatever they can do. You don't need to print out every single message or chat. Almost all of it is going to be lies anyway and have no substantial value. So print out the things that are important. If the scammers identified themselves, gave you addresses, names, phone numbers, whatever, print that out and keep it.
These bank receipts are really important, especially when we were involved with the Western Union settlement. It made it so much easier for me to copy and upload into their system because I had them all in a binder, and that was very important.
That raises a really good question, or I mean a really good point. You should keep all relevant information about the fraud. Remember, it is a crime and the evidence might be needed at some point. And Debbie raised the point of the Western Union and MoneyGram settlements. The Western Union settlement is still open. When last we heard, they were planning on coming back for a second round and allowing new victims to apply for reimbursement. So we don't know what regulatory actions may be possible in the future. If someone had asked us in 2015 or 2016 if we thought that it was possible to get your money back from Western Union or MoneyGram, we probably would have said no. But yet in reality, it did become possible. There's the possibility of future recovery for money sent by bank wire transfers. We don't know what the Federal Trade Commission, what the Federal Reserve System will do, etc. Always keep all hard data: banking, money, email, phone, contact information. All scammer stories, the chats and the dialogue, you can copy from most messengers and put it in a Word or a text file if you want, only because there may be some details that you missed. That's its only value. All transactional documents, documents received from the fraudster, documents for money transactions, other related documents. Some of them are going to be completely fake passports, fake military IDs, etc. But it's a good idea to keep them, if only because they may serve as potential evidence in the future. Photos, videos, media, etc. If the scammers send it to you, keep a copy in your folders for potential future use or in reporting. Debbie, in your case, your scammer showed you his photo and you had the presence of mind to get out your phone and take a photo from the screen.
Well, that wasn't a photo. Actually, I was on live with him on a live chat. He came on Yahoo Chat with a live camera, and I ended up taking a picture of my screen of his picture, and that was the only picture I had of the real person, which again put closure to me because now I saw a face and a voice, and I know that we tell people that can be changed with artificial intelligence. Remember, this is back in 2012. It was the real guy, and he was so delighted to come on because he wanted to keep things going. But I saw the face. I saw that he was a young man from Nigeria, and I took that picture to the FBI, and that's been out on national media. But again, I put that behind me. I had a reporter ask me the other day, did you ever find him? I said, no. And that wasn't important to me at the time because
Well,
there's so many of them out
you
there.
shouldn't have gone looking for him because
No.
that would have led to further emotional distress.
Well, and he also asked if I had gone after the guy whose pictures had been used. And I said, absolutely not. He said, well, don't you want to know? I said, no, because he was a victim also. And that's a very important thing is, keep those pictures, but put them away and don't go after the people who were in the pictures because then you'll be in trouble.
It is actually not unknown for scammers, particularly at the conclusion of the scam. Some scammers, this may sound ironic, but do have compassion for their victims, and they try and end it either abruptly because they believe that that's the easiest thing for the victim, although it's also easiest for the scammer. But sometimes they will share a photo as proof the fact that it has been a scam. So if you get a photo of the real person, keep that, because there are in fact things that you can do with that. All right, a crime summary. Before you can start to tell your story, you have to start by collecting all the relevant documentation concerning the fraud in one file that is kept in a secure location. Then summarize the important parts, not all the dialogue or the chats, but the core facts that the police will need. The police don't need to know what the scammer promised you, that he was going to meet you at the airport at a particular date and time, or the future plans that you were making. They want the basics, like used to be said in the old Dragnet series, just the facts. You can create this as a digital file or even a handwritten on a piece of paper. Just being neat and organized, because this is going to make the process so much easier.
It was interesting in my case, I kept the very first email that we had where I had his email address and information there. And I had the very last one, the day that he confessed. So it was 2 years, almost, 2 years to the date, but first one, last one, and everything else is just recorded in the book and I never looked at it.
Right.
So, but it gave them the basics.
SCARS also publishes what we call our Red Book, which is a complete scam organizer book that makes it very easy to collect the information that's relevant in a very concise, organized, easy to understand and read form. So you can pick up a copy of our Red Book from shop.againstscams.org. You can obviously do this yourself. The book costs $9.95, but you can also do this yourself manually, collecting this information and compiling it in a summary of the crime. Also create a contact sheet, separate piece of paper with the scammers, the perpetrator's names, all the names that he used, all the names of the people that were involved. Many times a scammer will tell you about their family members, lawyers, dead spouses, whatever it may happen to be, include all of that, their physical addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, any website addresses that the scammer may have given you, any IP addresses, if you know how to find those, as well as any of the fraudster's purported other identification information, any others involved, as I said, fake lawyer, fake military, fake family, etc. Unfortunately, most victims are so disorganized, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way. I mean it in the fact that a victim coming out of one of these crimes is in shock, disoriented, traumatized, but it makes it very frustrating for you to tell your story and for the police to understand it if you're not organized. You'll spend significantly longer telling your story than if you prepare for the police visit in advance and are fully organized. This is also going to make it easier to tell your story to others later on.
And as Tim said at the very beginning, this could be a very difficult thing to do at first. It's kind of like talking about end of life decisions. It's frustrating and it's emotional, but once you get it out and it's organized and on paper, then the emotion of it will be off of you. And it'll make it so much easier to walk in very objectively to the police or whoever with that documentation.
Absolutely. The other part of it is, even if you are significantly emotional when you go into the police, if you got this organized on paper, you can just read the information to the police officer, or you can just give the sheets to the police officer and let them copy it off of what you've already prepared. If you're trying to tell this story from memory, and interestingly enough, we're going to talk about that in a moment, it's much, much more difficult to recall things that are relevant, factual, because it's all going to be intermeshed and interwoven with the lies and the stories and the make-believe that you were told. So a big part of what is important is being accurate and precise. We recommend that you create a timeline, and a timeline is one of the most valuable documents that it will help not only you, but the police organize this in a linear fashion, because otherwise it'll just be a jumble. Create a timeline of the major events, which must span the complete crime from the beginning to the present at the point when you go in and report this to the police. List significant events in the course of the scam. When it began, in other words, when you had first contact, when you discovered it, the money transfers or gift card purchases, not the lies in the dialogue. Those don't matter because they're assumed. Every scammer is going to lay out days, weeks, months worth of lies and stories to keep their victims engaged and under control and manipulated. Specifically, your actions, any money that you received, any loans that you took out, any money that you borrowed. Did you take money out of your retirement account? Did you borrow money from friends or family? It's actually important that you put this down, because you may not be able to pay these loans back, and documenting them as part of this crime can have benefits when you're communicating with people that you may have borrowed money from. If you took money out of a retirement account, you may have tax liability in the future. And if you received anything from the scammer, money, if you got a ring, if you got a gift, this is stolen property, and that has to be identified to the police as well. Plus, you may owe taxes on what you received, even if you can't keep it. So it's important to keep this information and document it thoroughly in your timeline. Be sure to list any important actions by the scammer, the criminal. The police will probably not need the transcript of your chats and dialogues. We've talked about that before. It will just get in the way, since almost every word was a lie anyway. The other part of the dialogue is the police officer doesn't have time to sit there and sift through it. Unfortunately, so many victims, when they go into the police, they want to tell the total story. They want to tell the story of how they met, everything that was said, everything that was planned, all the ways in which they were deceived. But those are givens. Those happen to every victim. So the police already understand, and if they have questions, they will ask them. Also remember, another reason for the timeline is that trauma erases memories. Trauma affects your memories. You may not be able to recall everything as easily unless you sit down calmly and try and put it into an organized fashion before you go in. At the time that you're talking to the police officer, emotions are going to be running high, and it's going to affect what you remember. And telling the police everything is really important. So let's talk about the money itself for a minute. The money you lost is a major part of the story. In fact, that is largely what makes it a crime, and reporting it, because there is no crime unless it's reported to the police. This is what's going to have a big impact on you. You're going to want someone to help you with that. This is going to cause you to be angry and blame yourself. By creating a summary of the money and the finances involved, the money that you sent to the scammer with the receipts, the amounts, who you sent it to, how it was sent, dates, times, the money you may have received from anyone that might be connected, who from, the amounts, how it was received. If you received anything, we strongly recommend that you declare it. Did you give any financial information to the scammers? And what was it? Did you give them access to banking or other accounts? What accounts, when, where, and how? Was any money sent to anyone in your same country? In other words, did the scammer ask you to send money to what you thought was someone who was their family member, a business associate, or a friend of theirs, because they couldn't receive it easily where they were? Make sure that those are all documented.
Remember, it doesn't matter, I mean, it might to you, but it doesn't matter if it was a loss of $1 or $2.5 million. It was still financial fraud and requires us to report, because if they realize that how many people are being taken every single day, it might make a difference in the end. So you're a participant if you've lost $1 or $2.5 million.
So let's talk on that topic for just a moment. Obviously, even if you didn't lose money, it's still a crime. But the difference is that the police won't take a report unless there is what they consider to be financial loss associated with fraud. Fraud is fraud if you did anything. If you spent a minute of your time doing something because of this relationship, it's still a scam. It's still fraud. But the police won't react unless there has been a monetary or an equivalent loss.
And I just thought about something. My very first money that I sent was actually to the dating site, and I never really went to them, and I did, but they were like, well, read the fine print. It was your fault. But that's, you know, it shows the willingness of you to spend a little and then move into sending a lot. So again, remember to document all those things, even if you didn't send it to the scammer. You sent it to someone in this story.
Well, it's interesting that you raised that question. We just published an article on romancescamsnow.com on the topic of grooming. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing about grooming is it's a process, and it begins with small steps. We know that there's stranger trust. You trust the stranger, that gets you into the conversation. And then one of the manipulative techniques that you do to yourself is this thing called conformance. We all like to conform, to be part of the group, but conformance also plays a role in relationships, in adapting yourself to the other person, because we all want to be loved, liked, cared about. So we modify our behavior, our beliefs, etc., to conform to the other person. So in the grooming phase, one of the techniques that they use is they get you to spend just a little bit. This is a threshold event in the early stages of the scam during the grooming phase to confirm whether or not they're going to be able to get a big payday from you. If you'll spend $10, $20, $100, you'll spend $100,000. They know this. So there will be, at the initial stage, a small amount. Now, you may have been smart enough, let me rephrase that. You may have been aware enough to recognize what was happening, because many people do, and bail out, end the scam after the small amount. Some victims will, some victims will not. Some victims will, at the first mention of money, have enough discomfort. That conformity urge isn't strong enough in them, so they'll actually rebel, be a nonconformist, against the scammer's attempts at grooming. But regardless, it's important that everything be documented. And if you lost even $1, it still needs to be reported to the police.
It's interesting you say that about the small amount. I mean, I'm not one to give money out just to anybody, but that first ask for me, I mean, it was funny because the dating sites that I had been on, the men that I had been connected with, they couldn't read well, they couldn't write well. I mean, they were wearing these wife beater t-shirts. And so when the first ask was, hey, can you help my engineering friend get onto the dating site? I'm thinking, sure, we need more intelligent guys on the site. I was all in for that. And it was, you know, $50, $100. It was less than $100. But the first ask for a larger amount of money, that's when I went, wait a minute, you know, and I got a little uncomfortable. And he had really worked me through it was a power of attorney thing, really worked me through doing a Western Union, which I also thought that was a little bit on the scuzzy side. I'd never done that. So he had to work to get that money. And then after that, it was so much easier. But that first one, it was more like fun. It was a game getting another guy on.
Right.
So be careful.
This is a phenomenon called chasing the money. It's something that is a big part of gambling addiction. Once you know the old saying, in for a penny, in for a pound, that's what it relates to. If you've paid a penny, you're more likely to come back and pay a pound, $1. And once you've done that, it gets progressively easier. And by easier, what I really mean is you think about it less each time. Now, there may be some thresholds where you have to jump through hoops and go to a lot of work. You may be mortgaging your home. You may be taking money out of the retirement account. And these will be threshold moments also where you may be thinking to yourself, what am I doing? The reality, though, is that the scammer knows that you are more likely to go forward if you've sent anything previously.
Yeah, and the love talk comes out more too, and the urgency of it.
Right, those are all part of the group.
It's all part of it.
The love bombing, the sense of urgency. Now, typically, the emergency part of the scam doesn't happen until after grooming is essentially complete. In the new pig butchering romance/investment scams, the grooming takes place up to the point where you invest the first small amount of money. Then after that, full-scale manipulation and control takes place. Now, there is this sort of gray zone between grooming and full-scale control, where gaslighting may be employed quite extensively to isolate the victim from their support and peer groups so that they're dependent on the relationship, the fake relationship with the scammer. But just keep in mind that these mechanisms happen in virtually every scam.
Yeah.
All right. Rights. Know your rights. We recommend that before you go into the police department, you should look up what your victim's rights are for your particular state, province, country, so that you have some idea of what you should expect when you're talking to the police. You can look it up. Just look for victims' rights for your state, your country. California victims' rights, Ontario victims' rights, United States victims' rights, German victims' rights, whatever the case may be. When you tell your story to the police, it's important that you know that you have rights as a crime victim. Knowing this also helps you direct your story in ways that can help the police support your rights. Be sure to look them up.
We had a comment earlier, Tim, about one of our survivors went in and was very organized and detailed in her paperwork that she gave to the police. And they thanked her for being so organized and praised her for all the previous work that she had done. It
Right.
helped them out, and then she reported to IC3 and and the FTC after the fact. But again, very well organized, and it helps you to go in with a little more power and confidence than you might have if you went in totally unorganized.
Absolutely. And it also releases or reduces your stress, and it can reduce the amount of trauma that this experience can create as well. The more prepared you are in advance. Now, let's keep one thing really in mind. There is a sense of urgency in reporting because there is a timeline that enables the police to help you. And if you wait too long, that timeline goes out the window. So if you sent money by a bank wire transfer, you've got a few short days to be able to take action. Now, it is the case that sometimes they can do it for a longer period of time. Largely, that's a function of how willing the police are to do it more than anything else. But if you go in really organized and they can understand everything that's going on, they're going to be much more likely to work on your behalf. If you go in completely out of control, that's going to change the dynamic. Remember to ask the police officer, what are your crime victim rights? They're supposed to know this. All right, preparing to go into the police. Before running into the police station, you need to be prepared or your story will come out wrong. We've already talked about this. When this happens, you will be frustrated, maybe even angry with the police, angry with yourself. You'll be emotional. It will leak out. It won't go well. So before you go in and file a criminal complaint with your local police, there are things that you need to know to properly set your expectations. Gather together your evidence. We've talked about how to organize that and tools that are available for you. Make sure you have your timeline, your money records, and the rest of your story is well organized. That is what they will be most interested in. Understand that the police will not rush out, go to Nigeria or Ghana or anywhere else and arrest the scammers. No matter how well you tell your story, that's not going to change. But your report really matters because only about 1% of victims report these crimes. So governments have no real idea how many of these happen. And you're talking to the local police, and if they become more significantly aware of this, then there are things that they can do with local news media to be more aggressive in putting the word out so that other people who might become victimized can be aware and potentially avoid these crimes. It all begins with local awareness with your local police. They will also, in most cases, not be able to recover your money. There are some specific cases where they can and can assist you in doing this. The greatest tool that you have is your police report, because that's going to allow you to go to your financial institution, give them the police report, and demand that they help you. If you sent money to someone in your own country, such as in the US, you will need to make that very clear, because lots of this information coming at the police officer, he may not be picking up on every single nuance. The police are not interested in the chats or the things the scammer promised you. We said that before. They were all lies and of no importance in the crime at this point. Even though they're important to you and your story, please remember that. They matter to you, but they are not factual. The police want what is factual. If the scammer is ever arrested, then they will matter. Understand that you only have two objectives when you go into the police office, and telling them your version of the story that they need to hear. One is reporting the crime and getting that police report number, since certain benefits are going to come from that, including the ability to get your financial institutions to sit up and take notice. But the other is equally important, regaining control in your own life by confronting your fears and doing your duty. When you walk out of the police, you will not have any closure nor specific satisfaction. It just does not work that way, but it is important. That report matters.
That's a true statement, because I walked out of the FBI thinking that didn't do anything, and they're not going to do anything about it. And why did I do that? But years later, when I was sitting in the courtroom in Dallas and I saw what the FBI had put together, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's the reason why I did my thing 10 years ago, or that one of the other girls did her things a few years ago. It may come back around. We don't, it may be for someone else's benefit, not ours, but at least we got it out there and it contributed.
So one of the things to always keep in the back of your mind, nobody is going to rush out to West Africa or Indonesia or China and arrest one of these scammers immediately. But your reports do matter. And also the FBI, the FTC, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, whatever national crime agent or law enforcement agency there may be, are going to respond differently if you've gone to the effort of creating a local police report and include a police report number when you report to them. The other thing is, scammers make lots of money and they spend that money, and they spend it in a lot of different ways. So one of the things that does become possible if the FBI or the FTC get enough reports about what they can identify as individual scammers, they actually will send an extradition order to countries like Nigeria or Ghana or wherever, requesting the extradition of that criminal so that they can be arrested and tried in the United States. But also, scammers, once they become a little more wealthy, cross international borders. Immigration alerts are one of the ways in which scammers get caught. If you filed a report with the local police and then followed up with a national police report, be it in France, the United Kingdom, Canada, US, Australia, whatever, the information that you have, if you have a real name of any kind, that's also going to get put in a police watch list where that scammer could very easily be apprehended as they're coming into the country. Always remember that there are opportunities. More than 130,000 scammers were arrested. Criminals, organized criminals, were arrested in 2021 alone.
It was very encouraging to see ICE, immigration officials sitting in the courtroom with us in Dallas, knowing that if this guy got off at any point, they were going to pick him up and deport him. It was very encouraging.
As was the case with Anna in the
Inventing Anna.
New York socialite scammer.
Yeah.
We talked briefly about attitude. When you contact the police, make sure you physically go into their station to make a report. This is both important for your psychology and to assure that the report gets taken. But it also helps the police officers see you so they can offer some support. They're going to be human beings. They're going to feel empathy towards you. If you're on the phone, you are more likely going to lose your patience, get angry, frustrated. But if you're sitting in front of the officer, the interaction between you and the officer can keep this whole process more human. Remember, do not expect anything from the police, but make sure that when you talk to them, you use the words fraud, not scam.
You might also see if they have you might actually see if they have a victim advocate too that can sit in with you. Some stations may, some may not.
So remember that your local police are the first responders. They're the people you report to first. And all other reporting will depend upon their report first. State or national cybercrime units will receive their reports and become involved if there is something that they can do. You also need this report for banking and other places that need the report number, such as for benefits and other services. So, for example, in the United States, crime victims are provided counseling for free. Also, there are state victim compensation funds. You don't have access to any of those without a police report number. Do not go in a panic. This is why organizing in advance is actually really important. This helps you calm your panic, organize the information, regain more control in yourself. If you go in a panic, it's not going to save you and it's not going to go well. However, and this is important, if you really are truly afraid, be sure to ask the police how you can obtain a protection order. And I actually recommend that victims who do feel real fear from their scammer, they should actually get a protection order. Scammer may be in Nigeria, so what good does a protection order do if you're in Nebraska? Two things. Makes you feel more comfortable, and that is important. You're taking control, you're communicating your needs. You're also impressing on the local police the seriousness of how you feel about if you've been threatened by a scammer, get a protection order. It's a little bit more of a bureaucratic step, but it's not much more work. And if it makes you feel more comfortable, that's incredibly valuable.
Can I add something here too? I was working with a woman here locally that had become a money mule, and she had received a check from the state of Arizona in the name of another person in her bank account. So the reason we went into, we did it during COVID, we actually got a report online, but I said, you need to go to your bank immediately, take the first step in telling them what happened so that you might minimize your liability, you know, because she was from Colombia, she wasn't American, and she had difficulty with the English language anyway. And I said, you need to take this one by the horns, right? And you be proactive in this so that if the police come to your house, you know, after the bank has sent them out to get you, you will say, I've already reported this to the bank and I gave them this police report. It's just to help you and not, you know, if she had just sort of removed herself and said nothing, then I bet the police would have banged on her door and said, okay, you're going with us now, because now she took in money, she took money out, so she spent someone else's money and she's responsible for it.
Yes.
And, you know, ignorance is no defense at that point.
As I know full well, when I had a sheriff knock on my door for something I had no idea that was even happening.
Yeah.
So the reality is, you might, if you're in a situation where you received money from a scammer, talk to an attorney. Don't accept legal advice from anyone, including us. Talk to an attorney. Most attorneys will give you a free consultation. Be really candid, but all of this organization that we're having you consider now will help with that process too, because your attorney is only going to give you a few minutes. You need to go in there concise and be able to lay it out really quickly. The organization of your information is vital for that process too. Now, one of the things that we've observed, we've talked in one way or another to something less, a little less than 8 million victims of financial fraud. We've had a little under 12,000 victims go through our support in recovery programs. So many go in angry at the scammer, angry at themselves. If you're hostile with the police, you will get no results. They're not there to put up with someone who comes in and is angry, aggressive, raises their voice, etc. They understand that you're traumatized, that you are a human being, but you have to understand that yourself. And if you go in that way, you're only going to be more upset when you leave, because you're not going to get satisfactory results or even the ability to understand what positive results came from this experience. And they may very well respond in kind, and that makes the whole process even more traumatizing. Police are human beings too. They don't like people screaming at them, particularly in this world where such a significant percentage of people hate the police. Also, do not try and hide any information. Be open, candid. Don't make them dig for it. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You're the victim of a crime. Repeat that with us again. You are the victim of a crime. Even if you received money, it doesn't make you a criminal. You're the victim of a crime. Do not expect that they're going to do anything except take your report. This is about controlling your expectations. Their job is not to leave your town and chase after scammers around the world. But once you have the report number, then other doors open for you. Now, Debbie talked about this earlier. You may have been embarrassed or ashamed to talk to friends and family about this, but we do recommend that you ask a friend or a family member to go with you and report this. Be sure they understand that this is your story and to let you do all the talking. Tell them in the car, shut up, listen, you need to tell this story. You don't have to tell them much in advance, just that you were scammed. They can sit there and hear the story. Don't feel compelled to tell them everything in advance. But having someone with you will help you make it through this and support you afterwards, as Debbie talked about with her parents.
Very important.
Yeah. Because having a friend or family member is also going to moderate your own emotion. It will also make it possible for you to be a little more vulnerable, open, and honest with the police officer, which will help in the reporting process, quite honestly.
It also creates a very safe place. And for me, I've been able in the last 10 years to talk to my parents about so many more things, because it's, they knew me at my most vulnerable, first off when Lou died and then when this happened. So they've been through so many things with me, but I didn't hide anything from them because obviously they were part of it also with the money that was involved in our scam. But they were there just to hold my hand. They didn't say a thing because, it's scary walking into an FBI office or police department if you've never been there before.
Exactly.
And they're just people and they just want to hear your story.
So when talking with the police and filling out the report, first understand that very few police understand relationship scams very well. They may not be able to understand how the manipulation works. They may think you are mostly to blame. That does not matter. You don't care if they judge you. You're there for one purpose, to tell them your story and file a report, because that matters. When you go in, tell them you want to file a complaint for fraud. Remember that word. Ask them if you can speak with a fraud detective if possible, rather than a rank and file police officer, patrolman, or woman. If you are a woman, remember that you can ask to speak with a woman officer or detective also, and that can make quite a bit of difference in how easy the process will be for you. You may feel completely comfortable talking to a male officer, but if you're emotional, ask to speak with a woman officer if that will help you be more comfortable. A woman officer may not be available, but you can at least ask. Oops. Make sure you get the name and the badge number of the officer that takes the report. Write it down on something, get their card, walk away with the identification of the officer, because you may have follow-on information. You need to have someone that you can call and talk to in the event of. They will likely give you a form to fill in, or they may take the report orally. Be sure you start with just the basics. You were defrauded. You lost money. Tell them how much and how it was sent right up front. You have information, ask them what they would like to know. Don't just start drowning them in information. They have a particular format or structure that they need to fill in to take the report. So let them be the driver for how the story unfolds when you're talking to the police. If you sent money to someone in your own country, again, we come back to money mules. Tell them that clearly and suggest that this was an accomplice. Using that word will make them sit up and pay more attention to the fact that you sent money to someone here in the same country. Now, they may say it's in a different state or it's in a different town, but they actually can communicate with that other town and alert them. If it's a money mule, the most important thing is that that mule be shut down, because every money mule can be responsible for potentially victimization of hundreds. So the mule may be completely innocent. If you received money, you may not have known that you were receiving money from a scammer at the time either. But it's important the police talk to that mule and shut them down.
I think that would have made a big difference in my case, because as soon as I told them that I believed he was in Nigeria, that's when they said they couldn't do anything. They said, if you can get him here to the States, we can do something. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen for me. But in this case, where the people are here in Dallas, or they're here in Fort Lauderdale, or they're here wherever, I feel that they will do something if they're here on American soil.
And well, not just American soil, but more and more scammers are using local accomplices to receive their money, because it's becoming so difficult to transmit money internationally because of anti-money laundering and anti-transnational crime laws that are in place everywhere in Europe, the United States, Asia, etc. So more and more, there may be someone receiving money in your same country. It's important that they understand that. Give them any information that they ask for, no matter how embarrassing. The police officer in this sense is there to support you and help you create a report. Even if they judge, even if they snigger, even if they give you stink eye, do it anyway, because you are not to blame and you have nothing to be ashamed of. Know that yourself. Tell it your story and tell it with pride. You are doing something difficult. Also, before you leave, ask them to refer the case to the state or national cybercrime unit. Every state in the United States has one as a part of the state police. Same for Canada, same for Australia, same for New Zealand, the United Kingdom, the same. Local police can refer to Action Fraud or the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom, Ireland, whatever. Ask them to do it, because they may not think of doing that themselves. It's up to you to be your own best advocate, and this includes this.
I think the police departments would be very pleased, as in what we heard earlier, if we walked in as the most prepared victims of any fraud, of any crime. You know,
exactly.
You're helping them do their job. It's important.
Well, police view their job a little bit differently than the public does.
Right.
So in the grand scheme of things, an officer taking a report is an officer not out on the street, so to speak. So they always have that time pressure in the back of their mind that they need to get out there, they need to do their job on the street, and when they're taking a report, they're not doing that. So the more organized you are, the less stressful it is also for the police officer. Though that's not your primary objective, it will in fact help. They're going to be appreciative of how organized you are. And remember, that organization process that you've just gone through is cathartic, and it is helpful for you to get your own emotions a little bit more under control and be able to view the big picture and not be as lost in the lies and the dialogue. Now, if you do not get a police report, make sure you don't leave without one. But if the officer objects to taking a report, then simply ask to speak don't ask for his manager. Ask to speak for the watch commander, or ask to speak to his lieutenant or captain. Use those terms. And if you can't, ask for the police chief or the sheriff. You as a citizen, as a resident of that town, have a right to speak with your senior police officials. Do not accept no for an answer, but do not get hostile or nothing will happen for you. If you walked away with a significantly bad experience, call back and ask to speak to the police chief or the sheriff. You're going to get right through to their assistant at the very least. You can lay out your story and you can ask for an appointment to speak with the police chief. There's also usually a police commission of appointed police commissioners. You can speak with them. You can speak with your city council or your mayor. Don't hesitate. If you got a bad experience with the police, don't hesitate to bring in a politician to get yourself heard.
There was a question, Dr. Tim,
Do it
about
appropriately. Go ahead, Debbie.
there was a question that someone asked if they should report to a cybercrime unit after 3 years gone. Is there a timeline that is most important, or is it just important just to get it out, period?
First, cybercrime units are not first responders. Your local police are the first responder. There are things that are called statute of limitations. 3 years is not within a statute of limitation. For this kind of crime, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 20 years, I don't know. This varies by jurisdiction, state, country, etc. When in doubt, go and fill in a police report. Because if nothing else, this helps document it for your future well-being as well. Remember, we've said this before, attitude is everything. If they give you attitude, then just say, imagine if this was your mother sitting here, would you treat her this way? Turn it back on them if they give you attitude. That will shut them down in an instant. If you say that phrase, write it down, take it with you, it works.
I use that all the time in speaking to people, and
Exactly.
that does change how they see what's going on.
It completely destroys somebody's negative judgment, because then they realize, oh, this could happen to my mother or my sister or my father, and it does. Everybody can be scammed, including the police officer that's sitting in front of you. Them too. If they object, tell them you need it for your insurance or your taxes. This is your fallback. Police are accustomed to taking what are called informational reports because people need it for insurance purposes or taxes. Tell them your accountant or your bank need it too. The police routinely do this. Make sure you should ask if there is a victim's advocate. We talked about, you touched on this earlier, Debbie. A victim's advocate or liaison officer on staff that you can talk to. Now, typically, you'll bring this up while you're talking to the police officer, but if they resist, then ask for it up front. They know how to access local government benefits and other assistance that you might need, and they know how to help you tell your story effectively as well. For example, domestic abuse advocates understand trauma and can help you also. This process is the same process that all victims of crime go through, whether it's sexual assault, domestic abuse, homicide, robbery. Every victim needs to go through this same process of reporting. Truthfully, the police make it easier for some types of crime victims than they do for others. But You're not alone. This is not different just because you're the victim of a fraud, a financial fraud, an online fraud. Once you've done all of these things, then leave. Now, in the aftermath of your visit to the police, after all this is done, know that you did a very brave thing and you told your story. Important. This was probably the first time that you did this. You may not have told your family and friends yet, but it will not be the last, because if the police refer the case to the state cybercrimes unit, they may come back and have additional questions. The organized information that you prepared, you'll need for them. Your next step will be to report it to the Federal Trade Commission on the links that we provide, and possibly the FBI, possibly the Secret Service. You may, in your interaction with your bank, need that information and tell your story to one of their fraud team members. Very important, by the way. Some victims may get a text or a message or a phone call immediately after the scam saying that they're with the bank's fraud department and they need to confirm some information. If you haven't reported it to the bank's fraud department, don't believe them. That's a follow-on scam. You talk to them, and they have a specific phone number that your bank or financial institution will give you. Call that number and only talk to them through that number. Telling your story takes away a little more pain each time you tell it. This is a fact. Every victim experiences this. The more you tell it, the easier it is, the more you begin to disconnect the emotion from the event. It can still come back. It can still trigger you at times. But with each telling, it'll get a little bit easier. Be proud of yourself. Be proud that telling your story the first time is hard, and even harder to tell it to the police or a stranger. But if you do it, you will be stronger. You took one giant step forward. Now focus on getting on with your journey, with your recovery. Just remember, you will be telling this story again and again. It may not be 1,000 times like with you, Debbie, but you're going to tell the police, you're going to tell your financial institution, you're going to tell the FBI, possibly the FTC. You may tell a cybercrime police unit. You probably are going to tell the tax man in one form or another too. And eventually you're going to tell families and friends. Now, next time, we're going to talk about telling your story to your family and friends. We're not going to go into that now, other than to say, you don't have to tell them everything. In fact, the more information you tell them, the worse their judgment will be. Because when they see all of the drama and the dialogue, they won't understand how this manipulation works. You may not understand it. Truth is, you will probably blame yourself. You will be ashamed. You will feel guilt until you learn that it really wasn't your fault. So we're going to walk you through that whole process of how you tell your story to your family and friends on our next webinar next Saturday. Remember, SCARS is the leading publisher of books and guides specifically written for scam victims. And that includes our Slate book, which is a guide for family and friends so that they can understand how romance scams and relationship scams work. Easiest thing is buy a copy and just hand it to them. You don't have to explain all the details that way. They can read it and then they can come back and ask the specific questions that are relevant and offer you support. If they judge you, well, that's unfortunate, but unfortunately, judgment is a normal part of life. Don't be afraid of judgment. Just remember what's relevant and what's important. Visit shop.againstscams.org for all SCARS publishing books. And in fact, This webinar is an excerpt from our upcoming Gold Book, specifically on how to tell your story. We hear you. We've listened to millions of scam victims. As I mentioned earlier, we're a government-registered crime victims assistance and crime prevention nonprofit organization providing support and recovery services to scam victims. We have 31 years of continuous experience. Before there was a World Wide Web, we were out there educating people about the risks of scams on America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy, and others. If you can help, we need your help to provide free services that we offer to scam victims worldwide. If you're in a position to donate to SCARS, please do. It's quick, it's easy, and it's safe. Go to donate.againstscams.org if you would like to make a donation to SCARS. Remember, trust no one online. Learn and verify. You can verify who we are by visiting our corporate website at www.againstscams.org. If you want to learn more about scams, visit romancescamsnow.com. This is our encyclopedia of romance and relationship scams. And remember, report all scams and scammers without fail to the Federal Trade Commission at the link provided and on our own worldwide reporting network, anyscam.com. Thank you for trusting us and thank you for listening. We hope that this has been valuable. So Debbie, what would you like to add to this process of communicating with the police and reporting?
For me, it's just beware and be aware. And the greatest thing is to stand up and speak up. Because I found that over the years, that first visit to the FBI was frightening. And once I realized what had happened and what I could do about it and started to speak up, it became something that healed me from the inside out. So it's a step to recovery and to acknowledgement and to living life as fully as you can, realizing that it could be someone's mother that you're saving from this, and
or father or brother
or brother, sister, daughter, and they will listen to you when you put it that way. Because they think it'll never happen to them, but it could happen to someone that's dear to them. And when they hear our story, then it puts their radars up and they're listening to their loved ones speak. And when they stop speaking about something related to friendship or whatever online, that's going to bring out their antennae. And they will be very grateful that they heard your story at some point because they can pass it on.
If any members of our audience that are listening to this live would like to submit a question, just type your question in the chat. So we'll stay for a couple of minutes more to see if there are any questions. Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on is it's really important that you have this hard conversation with family and friends. Again, you don't have to tell them everything, and we'll touch on that in our next webinar next Saturday, but don't forget that your children are just as vulnerable to being scammed as you or your parents or your siblings or your friends or your coworkers are. Particularly teens and millennials think they know everything about the internet. Truth is, their brains haven't even finished developing yet. Sorry, kids. And they're going to be resistant. They're going to think, yeah, they can spot a scammer a mile away. No, they can't. Their ability to detect risks doesn't fully mature until their late 20s. That's when their brain fully matures. So you need to have the difficult conversations. If your children understand that you were scammed, they may think, oh, that's just mom, or that's just dad, or whatever. But the truth is, it will stick in their mind as a cautionary tale. So be sure that you have the difficult conversations. It doesn't matter if anybody judges you. What matters is you, as a responsible citizen, doesn't matter what country you're a citizen of, but as a responsible citizen, a member of society, have a duty to be watchful and protective of your fellow citizens in your society. That's why we have police. That's why we have 911 or 999 reporting hotlines, so that if you see something, you can say something. Well, the same is true here of scams. The majority of all scam victims do not talk, do not tell, do not report. It is a tragedy, because this is the principal thing that has enabled scams to grow to such an alarming rate. More in money lost than the gross domestic product of countries like Germany or France. Someone asked, what is the next step? Well, you report it to the police. Next step, report it to any appropriate agency that might be of use to you. You're going to report it to your bank if your bank was involved. In fact, you should report it to the bank that you're a victim of financial fraud regardless, so they can put a special watch on your accounts to see if there's any unusual activity. You should also consider filing a report with the credit reporting agencies to let them know that you're a victim of financial fraud, that your identity may have been stolen. That police report number is the critical thing for that process as well. You're also going to be reporting it in the event of a bank wire transfer to your bank, so that they can recall the transfer. They can claw it back. And if your bank isn't cooperative, then you can file a complaint with the Federal Reserve System or your national banking oversight agency or your state oversight banking agency. The police report is essential for that as well. So what is the next step? Once you've done your reports, you turn your back on the scam and the scammer, and you focus on yourself, your own emotional recovery. SCARS recommends that every scam victim, because whether you believe it, whether you know it, the odds are very high that you've been traumatized. And trauma isn't the experience itself, it's how you react to that experience. We recommend that you find a local trauma counselor or therapist. If you can't find a trauma specialist, a local psychologist or counselor will be of help. Just make sure that you have a good rapport with the person. You recognize that they're not your friend, they're there to help you recover. If you feel that you are ready for a support group and to be able to talk to other victims, let us know. We'll place you in one of our scam victim support groups. But you have to be able to moderate your emotions. You have to be able to communicate with other people. You have to be able to tell your story. Don't automatically listen to the recommendations of other scam victims, quite honestly. They're scam victims. They're not criminologists. They're not victimologists. They're not psychologists. This is a process that is complicated, difficult, and you want to make sure that you're talking to experts, not amateurs. That's the next step. Any other questions before we close our webinar for the day?
Thank you, sir. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you. We ran a little bit longer than wanted to do so, but we hope this was valuable and beneficial. This has been recorded so that we'll be able to present it through our social media, through our YouTube channel, and through our websites. This video is copyright 2022, Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, all rights are reserved worldwide. SCARS is a trademark of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. Again, our corporate website is www.againstscams.org. Our information website is www.romancescamsnow.com. If you're one of those that insists on looking at scammer photos, we recommend against it, but you can do so at www.scamsonline.org. We also offer information in Espanol, in www.contraestafas.org. We thank you for joining us today, and this concludes our webinar this week. Come back next Saturday for part 2, sharing your story with family and friends. Thank you, everyone.